Next stop on our tour around all of the show gardens, again with Carolyn and Joby, who are taking us through tram lines. Now, this has been one of the more frequented gardens with people making their way through, but take us through it.
Well, we were approached actually not too long ago. It's really only been 6 or 7 weeks in the making, but the idea was to work with Dylan to create an accessible garden, and that wasn't really overtly looking like that's what had happened. So we were trying to work out ways to make the garden compliant, but if we did it from the ground up, maybe we could do it without it looking like that's what we had done. Many times you see gardens that have been retrofitted or had some compliance work done on them, and then somebody's made it compliant with a series of measures.
Yeah.
Dylan didn't want it to look like that.
Yeah.
Dylan wanted it to just be intuitively designed, universally designed, that just made it accessible for everybody, rather than just sort of accessible compliance sort of thing.
We tried to be compliance ninjas rather than compliance appliers.
That's true.
Stealth out there, that's good.
And we said to him, like, how do you garden? You know, do you want to have some vegetables? And he went, nah, I don't want any vegetables. He hasn't got time to grow vegetables.
Yeah.
He wants a place where he could relax with family and friends, and a cool space that was really inviting. And what we wanted to try and do was make everybody sit down in the space. So we put loads of seating in the garden, and we wanted everybody to just walk in and just sit down, because that's really inclusive for people. If you're in a wheelchair, putting everybody at the same eye level is lovely and really inclusive. We wanted to have elements to the garden that were really friendly for people that were vision impaired. So we used some yellow flowering plants, this kangaroo paw, because yellow is one of the last colours to register for people with vision impairment, and so it was important that we use that colour. But as well as that, lots of sensory plants where there's lovely foliage to touch, and perfumed plants to perhaps crush the leaves and smell. So everybody could enjoy the garden in some sort of way. So, and then you talk about the strips too.
Well, yes, there was. Part of being compliant is to highlight the external corners in a space. So again, rather than just coming along with the white tape at the end of it, we sort of tried to make a bit of a design feature of these, so they sort of stand out without looking like that they've just been added on at the end.
So, and we said, are there any particular issues around how it needed to look? They said, no, it just needs to be contrasting.
Yep.
And wherever there's an external corner that someone could bump into, it just needs to be highly visually contrasting. Yeah. So we did that. A couple of the other measures that we did in addition to the seating, we used armrests along the seating. So for people that are wheelchair bound, they may be able to get out of their wheelchair if there's armrests. If there's no armrests, they can't. They can't get out of the wheelchair. So we incorporated armrests into the seating in the hope that people may be able to actually get out of their chair and jump onto the seat and get the benefit from that. One of the other things that we did was the fire pit. So we knew we wanted it to be this funky, cool, coming together family and friends zone, and so the fire pit's a big part of that. But we used a gabion wall around the outside of the fire pit. If we can come over here and we'll show you. But instead of the wall continuing all the way around, the wall's got a gap in the middle of it. So the idea being is that if you are in a wheelchair, you'd be able to be right in the heart of the conversation, rather than perched on the end. So very often the lived experience for people if they're in a wheelchair is that they're often parked on the end or perched on the end, or sitting opposite rather than in the heart of the conversation. So it's a really purposeful break in that gabion wall there, so that any people, even two people that are in a wheelchair, would be able to sit right in the middle and be part of the whole thing. Now, this was one of the things, because this has been a bit of a running joke between Dylan and us. We've used a regular fire pit. The only difference to make this fire pit compliant is raising it by about 400 mil. And the reason for that is that it not only means that Dylan could, or anybody in a wheelchair, could sit around the fire and enjoy the fire, but really they should be able to safely tend the fire, adding wood to the fire, toasting marshmallows, and
all the fun bits.
But this is the bit that Dylan's laughed at. So even that they should be able to really, it should be high enough that they could scoop out the ashes the next day and clean out the fire pit, which Dylan said, well, that sucks for me, doesn't it? And I said,
that's the non-fun bit. Yeah, exactly.
But it was that idea of it not just being about accessibility, but it being about functionality for people who have different abilities. And this is really, even though it just looks like it's a design feature and we've used this gravel, there's a really purposeful reason. Now, obviously this gravel would displace if you're in a wheelchair, so which would be hard if you were trying to get from one side to the other, but but potentially really beneficial if you accidentally were getting too close to the fire pit. So it's got an auditory sort of, like you can hear the gravel under your feet, so if you're vision impaired, it's a warning that you're getting close to the fire pit. And of course it displaces under your feet, so you get a sensory sort of trigger that you're getting close to the fire pit. So not great big changes. And a few people have said to us, how hard was it to make it compliant? And the answer is not very hard. Really not very hard. You just need to think about the levels and a few things that, as Joby said, we've ninjaed in so that it doesn't really need to look like an all accessibility garden. It just reads as a space for everyone.
Yep. And then in terms of plant material, you've got a whole heap of...
So that was one other thing that Dylan really said. He said, I love Australian plants. And we said, great, so do we. So loads of Australian plants and a beautiful mix of quite textural sort of plantings. But yeah, he loves Australian plants. So, big emphasis on that.
Mixing it
He
together.
wasn't terribly interested in the whole active gardening and little vegetables
Yeah.
and little poking about things. He just wanted a bit of a cool space just to invite some friends around and just have a beer and relax and chill.
Very big on connectivity, and that's been a big part of our journey. Is that we started when we were approached to design this garden, we started thinking about everything in terms of accessibility and compliance, and then at the end of the journey we're just thinking far more about connection and inclusivity rather than I guess levelling up from all sort of access, but to kind of more socially inclusive and social connectedness.
And looking, obviously there's people throughout the course of the show, it's been a garden
been
that
very
people have
busy.
been engaging with.
People through this, people of all abilities. It's just working beautifully in that regard.
Yeah. And also take us through the tram lines and some of the other sculptural elements through here as well.
Well, we needed to have a link to where Dylan's come from and why he is Dylan. And so...
And you love tennis and you're a massive fan.
I love tennis. I've played tennis. We met playing
And the kids
tennis.
all play tennis.
I met playing tennis. There we go.
Playing tennis, so
It's the perfect...
we've got a good, strong connection to tennis. But we wanted to reference tennis, but not an in-your-face kind of a way. We just thought a subtle reference to the lines of a tennis court that's broken, and also is a way of competing with the dominant archway of these plane trees through here. It's often quite a dark space through here, so we wanted something light and tall. I mean, these are 3.5 metres tall, but they sort of are dwarfed.
Dwarfed,
by these
yeah, exactly.
Huge trees, but so that was a way to sort of reference his past without being like tennis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just the aesthetic, but it kind of contains the design a little bit and gives us sort of a sense of a ceiling in it, which makes
scale.
it and scale, and just gives you some sense of being in the space, which is great. It's been a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
It has been. It's been great fun.
Even though, because one other thing with constructing, obviously, these gardens are temporary for the space, so
it's tricky.
Working it out so that you can have it seamless.
And we're in a tree protection zone because of these trees, so you can't penetrate the ground. You can't dig, and there's a whole bunch of things you can't do. So working out all the levels, and Job spends an awful lot of time on that, and that was probably one of the trickiest bits, really, truth be known. The trickiest bit, because we didn't want to have all the railings and all those things that people traditionally associate. So we've worked hard, but it's all doable.
Make it look seamless as long as you get in and do the groundwork in earlier and make sure you got it right.
Got to start from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And we came and we surveyed all the critical points, and just so I could sit down in 3 dimensions and work out where the ramps had to be. And then we marked out the site, and then on day 1 we were asked to move the site about 10 metres down the hill.
And we were like, no!
And we were like, oh, what's it going to do? What's it going to do? So we sort of, it's close, but it's not as sort of sharp as we wanted to. We still had to get back down to the beach from the other side.
It's pretty close, but lots of people getting in and lots of people loving it. So
Yeah.
it's a great reward.
And finally, this is one that's going to go through and with raising funds as well. So after the materials will live on beyond the show itself.
So hopefully it's going on to be auctioned off, and it's being auctioned off. So hopefully it goes on to have a lovely life.
It's for sale now. There's an ongoing online auction.
Yeah.
There we go. We'll have to link
which is
across
great.
that.
And I think that maybe one of the totem tennis sets is in. The kids are all playing totem tennis
been
out the
watching
back. Now the link between totem tennis was that when Dylan was a young lad and had been in his wheelchair since he was about 3, and somebody gave him a totem tennis set, and that fired up his interest in tennis. So if that went on to create this amazing world champion for Australia, we figured, well, totem tennis is in.
Well, that's been equally popular.
Yes.
I say, there's much as sitting and enjoying this garden, I've been seeing plenty of people enjoying some totem tennis out there.
Well,
So
that's the
strings
lead.
out there are getting shorter and it's flying up.
Yeah.
awesome.
good.
Well, thank you so much for taking us through and showing us the garden, and with kids in tow as well.
Yes,
Obviously
kids in
enjoying a
tow.
day. So it's been great coming, and for those that can't come out to the show, getting a touch of it online.
Good on you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, Horty man.
Yes.